Newman, a name with a long history in Joplin. I'm Lisa Oligas, and you're watching Newsmakers. Ask any Joplin native what they think of when you say the name Newman, and you can get several answers. Newman's department store, the Newman building now serving as City Hall, and the Joseph Newman Innovation Center. In this edition of Newsmakers, we examine the life and legacy of the late Joseph Newman with the help of his wife, Sarah. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
Now, your husband's legacy dates back to 1890s. So, and the first Newman's dry goods store. Tell us a little bit about how they got their start. He was an immigrant, right?
Joseph Newman arrived from Germany through Ellis Island, got on a railroad train and rode it all the way to Pierce City. That was the last stop. That was the first Newman mercantile store. He married Caroline Strauss, and she and he together had 10 children.
Wow.
And they all went into the retail business. So you could go to any town, anywhere, and meet a relative of the original Newman family. So Joseph Newman's name was carried down through the second Joseph Newman, and then my husband, who was Joseph Newman III, and they had no middle name, which drove the IRS nuts because they either put an X or a none in parenthesis in the middle part of their name. But the 1910 Newman department store was built by two of Joseph Newman's son and a son-in-law.
So was that Albert and Saul?
Yes, yeah, senior.
So what made them want to come and build that building? That was at 6th and Main in
Well,
Joplin.
I'm sure that Joplin was a booming mining town, but their vision was way beyond a mining town or a little bitty town in southwest Missouri, because they built the most outstanding department store that had ever been built or seen, certainly in this part of the country, and by a very, very famous architect who also designed the Union Station building.
It was Austin Allen.
Right, right.
So was that a unique for a store at that time?
Very unique, yes, because it had elevators with uniformed operators. It had marble fountains. It had mahogany display cases. It was first class, beautifully done, full of first class, wonderful, exciting merchandise. So they tell me, because my affiliation with Newman's department store started in 1950.
It's much later, yeah?
Yeah, much later.
So it was a multi-level store at that building.
It had 5 floors.
So was that unusual for the time?
I would say, yes.
And so when they built that, and they started, I mean, that seems like it's a big, big investment. Was it considered a success at the time?
Yes, very much so. It continued to be so for years and years. In fact, the Newman Mercantile Company expanded to what totally was 7 stores. And so my husband, Joe, was born in Enid, Oklahoma, where his dad was the manager of the Enid, Oklahoma store. And he moved to Joplin in 1949 when his dad became the manager of the Joplin store.
Okay.
So
did your husband work in the Joplin store?
He did, yes. Growing up, he did, and that was always what he was going to do. He was going to go in the retail business, and so his education was slanted toward that. He graduated from Joplin High School as valedictorian in 1954. He went to Dartmouth. He graduated with high honors in 1958. We were married in June of 1958.
So where did you meet?
We moved to Philadelphia because he went to Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania. And after he graduated, we moved to New York. And he worked for Macy's, the flagship store at 34th and Herald Square. He went in as a management trainee, and he was there for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, he was the assistant to the president, so he rose pretty fast. But we had 2 children by that time, and we did not want to raise them in New York.
Okay.
So we came home, and Joe went into the department store. When you are in a family business, the first generation starts it, the second generation grows it, the third generation maintains it, and the fourth generation just kind of falls apart because there are so many people involved.
Right.
So usually it takes one person to buy everybody out. And so in 1968, that's what happened.
Okay.
So he left the retail business, and we bought a savings and loan, which is a real dinosaur. I don't know if anybody even knows what that is anymore, but it was like you could do all kinds of banking there, and you could do all kinds of loans there. And so it was formed as our own business. It was a small business that was commissioned by a corporation in Nevada called Farm and Home Savings.
Okay.
So, and with that, he left the retail business, and he went into insurance, and he was able to have the time to do other things that he was interested in, which when you are in the retail business, you do not have.
You're really usually busy, yes.
Yeah.
How do you think that having that savings and loan, the Farm and Home, shaped his outlook on economic development?
Well, it was a springboard to so many other things. And he became very involved with the chamber. He had the time, and he became a member, ex officio member, I guess, of the chamber's. They didn't have an economic development committee per se, but they had a board of directors who were a little stymied because the first business that Joplin had, a new business, was FAG Bearings. And then they went after and got Gulf States. But as Larry Hickey said, who I don't know if you remember,
I do remember Larry Hickey, yes.
He said they were sitting in a board meeting at the Chamber of Commerce one day, and Joe said, you know what we need to do is we need to build a shell building.
Okay.
And they said, what is a shell building? Well, it's a 40 or 50,000 square foot building with walls and a floor, period. And so you build that, and they did not have the industrial park yet.
Yeah.
They had the land sited, but they didn't own it.
Yeah.
So they decided that they would go for it, and they did, and the rest is history.
All right, well, we have lots more to talk about in that world of economic development, but we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we will learn why Joe Newman became known as the godfather of economic development in the Joplin area. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Newsmakers, where we are in conversation with Sarah Newman about her husband's legacy and its impact on business growth in Joplin. Sarah, welcome back.
Thank you.
I am told Joseph became known as the godfather of economic development. What do you think of that title? Why do you think he earned that?
Because he developed a whole new business plan to develop business in Joplin that had never been heard of, and it all stemmed from, let's build a shell building.
Yeah.
And so they started with one. I think eventually they went to 7. The industrial park filled up. They ran out of room. They bought another property called Crossland industrial park that I understand now is full also, and they're looking for more land. So, but he was not confined to the city. He was also had a lot of contacts in Jefferson City. He had a lot of contacts in Washington. He was appointed to the Hawthorne Foundation board in Jefferson City, and that is the economic development arm of the state. So he had a lot of contacts and was able to work for Joplin through all of his various contacts. So he wasn't just economic development, though.
Yeah.
If you look at the things that he did, he was instrumental in arts, in music, in education. He was part of the Freeman Health System Board of Directors for 10 years. He, if you name anything in Joplin that has to do with the quality of life, you will find his name associated there.
What drove him to want to help build his community?
Because he loved this community. He wrote an address for his valedictory address to at his graduation in Joplin High School.
Yeah.
And the title was, "I am part of all I have met."
Wow.
And he was 18 when he wrote this. This is quite, it is quite something to read. And he felt that so strongly. And we enjoyed so much raising our children here because we had been raised here. Well, Joe came in the 8th grade at North Junior. That's where we met.
Okay.
And I had lived in Joplin all my life. So we loved this community. We wanted to raise our children here.
High school sweethearts and everything.
And oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, we were together actually 53 years.
Wow.
So, but you know, it was just important to us. Family is very important.
And I'm glad you said us, because even though he did a lot of this thing, it was his job, his career. It's a partnership when you're married. And I'm sure that there were a lot of times where he was going to meetings and you were like, really? Are you coming home? So, I mean, what did you think about economic development? Why was it important to you as well?
Well, you know, I was in my heavy-duty mother stage. I had 3 children. I was very involved in all of their activities. And truthfully, it wasn't until after he passed away I was aware of all the things that he had done and contributed to. The economic development, I was involved in that because there was a lot of socializing that was done. I think Joe went through 2 city managers, I think 4 chamber presidents, and we traveled together and, you know, talked to various prospects, and so it was a lot of fun. He did the hard work, I did the fun part. So
meeting and greeting.
Yeah,
right,
right. Which they were most interesting people, and so I was, I would say, a tag along. I was, as I say, I was in my heavy mother period, and when Lee, my youngest, was, I think, a junior in high school, Joe called me one day and he said, I want to get my stock brokerage license. And I want you, we had 2 offices, one at 4th and Main, one at 20th and Connecticut. And I had been out to the 20, I had to learn to be a teller. I had to do all this other stuff. So, so we worked together in that instance, and then we built the building at 20th and Connecticut where the library is now. And so he said, I want to get my stock brokerage license, and I want you just to go to 20th and Connecticut, just check the mail, you know, it'll be fine. I said, I don't want to do it this year. I want to wait till Lee graduates. Yeah. So he said, well, I want to do it now. So Lee said, fine, Mom. So, so he endeavored along those lines, was very successful, and started with New Hard Cook and eventually brought Stiefel to Joplin in 1994.
Wow.
I on the other hand, was at the 20th and Connecticut office just to check the mail. Yeah. So the first day I get there, they hand me all the papers to take an FHA loan application. If you have never done that, trust me, you would be lost. And those poor people that I took the loan application from, I had to call them 10 times from things that I forgot. But eventually, that was in '82, eventually we formed our own mortgage company called S&J Mortgage. And so I was in charge of that at the 20th and Connecticut.
It sounds like he always had an idea for another new business.
Yeah, right.
Was it always like, okay, why aren't we stopping with this one? Did you ever think, can we just land on one? Or did you like the change?
It was great. I thought I would never learn the mortgage business. I thought I would never understand, you know, how anything worked, but I did, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm so glad I had that experience, because you never know what life is going to deal you. Mm-hmm. And that experience helped me quite a bit in dealing with what I was going to have to deal with.
You were always learning. What were his guiding principles? I mean, did he have kind of a focus of, this is how I'm going to run my business?
Well, he had tremendous integrity. He had wonderful honesty. He had fair-mindedness always, and he had great humility. He did not want to be the gunner in front. He wanted to make the plans and share it among and then sit back and let others take the glory, because he never, ever sought that. So when this building came up, somebody said, well, what would he think of that? Knowing him, knowing that he didn't want to take the credit for anything. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think he would be so proud and pleased that the chamber, because they bought that land to tear it down to make a parking lot because they needed more parking for the chamber. Mm-hmm. And then they thought, well, wait a minute, I think this would be a better fit. And then that's what they decided to name it, which was very appropriate.
Which we have segued into the Joseph Newman Innovation Center, right?
Right.
But we know the Innovation Center is having an impact now. As we go to break, we check out some of the budding businesses calling the Innovation Center home. For KSS Cleaning Services, the Newman Innovation Center offers a little bit of warehouse, workshop, office space, and easy access.
We absolutely love this space. So we have a garage door where our cleaners and our floor guys can come straight in, get their equipment, and go straight out. We use this space for everything. We have our office here, which we do bids out of. We have meetings here. We have, our payroll and accounts payable and receivable is here. And our supplies are stored right over on that side of the office.
KSS is a relatively new business forming in August of 2023. Locating in the Innovation Center as an incubator business Labor Day weekend, they started here with just 2 staff members. Renting this space brings benefits.
Sometimes it's really hard to get the things that you need from your landlord, or you're also paying extra expenses. Like here, Wi-Fi is included, which is a huge thing for everybody. Our billing, and we communicate over email, and that's how our bids go out and everything. So the Wi-Fi being free is a great part of it. We get some perks like that here that we would have to pay for out of pocket elsewhere on top of our rent.
And minimizes risks.
It's a relief to know that you don't have payments going into a building that you might not be able to get rid of.
Allowing the company to focus on growing.
We started here with just 2 office employees, and we had about 10 accounts between August and September, so we moved into an office space, and we were growing. We were gaining new accounts all the time. But we grew to the point that we were able to purchase another company.
So you've got a big conference room here, so you can hold for meetings. You can also have a TV for projection.
Monica Montalbano is a remote worker for a dairy equipment company, often travels, and when not working at home, is here.
So it fits my job really well because I can travel as needed, but sometimes it's nice just to get out of the house. And so I use the co-working space for the added Wi-Fi benefits and the conference rooms we have here as well, and just to kind of get out and not be stuck in the home office 24/7.
She basically rents a desk but takes advantage of other Innovation Center amenities.
And then you also have behind you a podcast room. Yeah, it's a pretty cheap rent, and you get to utilize the facility 24/7. And then you can also use the hot desks if they're available. Otherwise, you can sit at the countertop office as well. And then you can utilize the conference rooms.
How important is it for you as a remote worker to be able to have it's high-speed internet?
Yeah, it's great internet. I actually come here for that benefit because at home I have satellite internet, and so it's not the best when you're trying to do video calls or share your screen on Teams. And so being able to come here and actually have the high-speed internet really makes it's a big benefit. It's the main reason I use the space.
These engineers normally work remotely, but needed office space to collaborate and train new hires. While Tektronic IT Services is calling this incubator office home for now. The goal for many of these businesses, being in a home of their own.
We signed a year lease with them, and hopefully, our hope in the future is that we can grow into a space of our own building, something like that would be great.
Welcome back to Newsmakers, where we have been discussing the godfather of economic development in Joplin, Joseph Newman. Back with us again is Sarah Newman, his wife, and joining our conversation is Doug Hunt, the Director of Entrepreneurship at the Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you both for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
So, Doug, thanks for joining us. We got a look inside the Newman Innovation Center. How many startups have been helped there?
Since 2006, there's probably been 400 or 500. With a grand total of 10,000 new jobs created. Now, granted, half of that is because of mergers and acquisitions, but it's been a tremendous success.
So what are the rules for setting up and working in the incubator space?
Well, it's just that. It's for new startups, and it's to help them get started in business with a low overhead. So at the Joseph Newman Innovation Center, somebody can come in with a hot desk membership with no long-term commitment for $150 a month. It includes high-speed internet, no CAM charges. I mean, it really is amazing in the fact that they can take advantage of the amenities like both conference rooms, a podcast recording studio. It's pretty incredible.
Sarah, you and your husband did run a small business, several of them actually. How do you think something like this would have helped you? Why do you think this is a good fit for what he stood for?
Well, we had the resources. This is to help people that don't have the resources, to provide the resources for them. And I think it's a great, wonderful thing. And it's a very exciting thing. They had a board the first 10 years that the Joe was open. And I used to go to those meetings, even though they were at 7:30 in the morning. And I said to Steve Russell, could we move this up a little bit? And he said, well, everybody goes to work, Sarah, except you. So I kept going, and it was just so exciting to hear everything that was going on there, and also around the state. So, and then when Doug came in, he's been very generous and kind to me to keep me informed about what's going on and changes that have been made, and just that it's a living, growing thing in downtown Joplin to help many, many people.
Do you think your husband would have been proud of this?
Yes, I do. I think he would have been. I think he would have been very humbled by the fact that they named this building. And it's pretty visible, because if you go down 4th Street between Pennsylvania and Virginia?
Kentucky.
There's a pretty big sign with his name on the building. So I think he would have been very pleased and proud. I do. And his family is certainly thrilled with the legacy that has left to them.
Doug, does this guide you at all, knowing how Joe kind of lived his life and the things he did? Does it align with his principles?
It really does, and a very personal story I have along those lines. I was a 25-year-old man a long time ago and decided to run for city council. And I remember being invited to a council candidate forum and had to go out and buy a jacket and a tie. And I showed up with people that were 20, 30, 40 years my senior. And when I got to the venue and walked through the door, Joe Newman was the very first person that greeted me. And he looked me right in the eye and treated me like a peer, shook my hand, and he said, Doug, thank you for being here and taking an interest in your community. And I will never forget that. So when I took this position at the chamber after having been self-employed for 21 years, The very next day, Sarah calls me and wanted to meet with me to make sure I understood the legacy. So we compared notes pretty quick, and I think she knows that Joe's legacy and who he is and what type of man he was that loved the community resonates with me. So it means a lot to be in charge of that legacy and helping these small businesses grow. And he would be honored to know that it's a powerful economic development tool in Joplin.
What are your hopes, both of you, for the future of business in Joplin? What would you like to see, Sarah?
That it would continue to grow the way that the example has been set, that there will be leaders who can take charge, not necessarily want the credit, but are able to move the community forward. I mean, it's been leaps and bounds growth since all of this started. And so I would just hope that would continue under each generation to come. And if you look around, and not just economic development and the fact that they need another industrial park, but in so many other areas, the arts for sure, you know, for instance, the Harry Cornell Arts and Entertainment entity, and all the things that are happening in education and everything else that Joe is so involved in, as well as economic development. He loved that. He loved business. He was very good at what he did. He also missed the retail business to the extent that he became partners with two other friends in the establishment of Food for Less. So he kind of went back into retail.
Had to go back into it, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, not a lot.
How much of Joplin's roots would you say can be traced back to Joseph Newman?
I would say quite a bit, because here's the thing that's powerful in my memory about Joe, and that was he was a visionary and he took action to make things happen. So that's why it's so fitting to have the business incubator named after him, because it was Joe that had the idea of the industrial parks, the idea of the shell buildings, build it and they will come, and they did. So we can attribute his innovative thought process and passion for the community is the reason why we are where we are today. And so, yeah, deep roots, and that history will never go away. 100 years from now, Joplinites will be able to look back and say that Joe Newman played a huge role in pivoting and turning Joplin into what it was at the turn of the last century.
Sarah, does that make you proud that is his legacy?
Indeed, indeed, yes, very much so. Well said. Well said, yes.
Well, thank you both for joining us and sharing this tribute to Joseph Newman.
You bet.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this edition of Newsmakers. I'm Lisa Alligas. Thanks to our guests, and thank you for watching.